Hello, hello, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. We're so glad that you all are joining us. It's lovely to see some familiar names there and some new ones. So to everyone, welcome and thank you for your time today. My name is Caitlin Green. I'm a senior consultant here at TRG Arts, and I am joined by my wonderful colleague, Katie. Katie, please say hi to everyone.
Hi, folks. Katie Hay. I'm a consulting analyst here at TRG Arts. Welcome.
And we are here today to talk about 5 metrics to support your annual fund campaigns. But before we get into that, as everyone's settling, we just want to encourage you, welcome you to use all of the things that Zoom will allow for. So you can use chat, you can use Q&A. If you've got questions along the way, please drop them in there and Katie and I will answer them as we go. And if you've got questions for your colleagues in the room, please ask them as well. Make sure that when you type into chat that you're sending it to everyone so that everyone can see your questions and also participate in answering that. We've got a great community of people here on the call today. So certainly let's tap into the expertise of your colleagues as well. Katie, you and I were just talking about some of our favorite holiday foods. We are coming into a celebratory season where people are gathering with families, maybe for the first time in a long time, maybe not yet. We're talking about food. So I'm just curious what everyone's favorite holiday food tradition is. Katie, what's yours?
Can you tell it's lunchtime? We're thinking about food.
It's always food, yeah.
So I'm from the UK and mince pies continue to be the OG of holiday food. But I have been really adopting the American apple pies, pumpkin pies since been living here. How about you?
Well, I'll carry on the sweet tooth. I love a good sugar cookie, you know, like an iced pretty sugar cookie, but now I have kids and so they're totally hideous because my kids think more is always better and they just make me really happy. Lots of good memories at all holidays, making sugar cookies with my family and now with my little kiddos. Okay, so drop yours into chat. What does everybody love? What are you looking forward to this holiday season? And we're going to get started. So we are going to talk about 5 metrics to support your annual fund campaign. For those of you who don't know TRG well, this is what we do and who we are. We are teachers and learners, and we bring data to the table in all of the conversations that we have, whether it's in one-on-one consulting relationships with clients in the UK, North America, or if it's through data center practices where we're really looking at how we segment data, how our databases are behaving, or in group consulting sessions like this. So this is a bit of who we are. We ask questions. We hopefully answer some of your questions as well. So in our work today, we're talking about annual fund campaigns, and in our world, this is all about individual donors. These are people that you're managing relationships with. And in fact, a fair amount of this is really about lower levels of giving. Now, I think you can apply everything that we're talking about here today to your major donor, to your major donors and the campaigns that you mantle there. But we also recognize that there is something very bespoke in each of those relationships that you are probably already tending to with extraordinary care. So think about these metrics as a way of supporting your one-to-many annual fund campaigns. Calendar year end, fiscal year end, subscription renewals and acquisition pieces at that time of year. So that's really what we're looking about. Now, data, here we are talking about relationships, right? These are people. And now immediately we're going to start talking about data in it. The reason why we like data is because when it's used strategically, it can bring this laser focus into your campaigns, into these philanthropic relationships that you're managing, that you're cultivating, and maybe that you're just now starting. So today, these 5 data points are going to help you get to that focus and focus that leads to action. So this is all about supporting the bottom line and about supporting the people who support your organization. So bringing data into a routine around annual fund, around any patron-centered campaign, will give you all the information you need to know about how to respond. And that's really what today is about. It's about action and response. What are the things that we need to regularly be looking at so that we can take action to move things forward, to steer our ship down the course that we're looking for? I don't know if any of that metaphor worked, but this is about making sure we get where we want to go. And the data will help you know how you need to respond to do that. So here it's about guiding and inspiring action. And let's dig in. Now, I said we're digging in. We are digging in, but before we get to the 5 metrics, we've got to start here. We've got to start with campaign goals. Now, I suspect that many of you, all of you, probably have very clearly articulated goals around the revenue for your annual fund campaigns. And that's probably not enough. That's a good goal. Have that goal. We've got to know what that is, but that's a budget. There are other goals that we would encourage you to bake into your campaign so that you've got strategies that really align with where you want to go in these relationships. So with your colleagues, with your executives, with your staff, your team, whoever it is that helps you around this table, you might start asking questions like this. What kind of engagements are we looking for? Second gifts, first time gifts? Is this all about acquisition? Is this about upgrades? Which segments do we really want to see action from? Are we really focusing on people who are giving more than £100 a year? Or are we looking at the lowest level of entry gift just to rebuild pipeline? Know what segments that you want to focus on so that you've got the right data to pull you through that, but also the right strategies to manage it. There are also goals that you might set around integration with other departments and campaigns and collaboration with sales campaigns. Many of you have organizations right now that are deep into holiday programming sales. How are we working alongside those campaigns and not competing with them? So setting goals about how you collaborate and work on these campaigns together can be really effective in keeping you focused. You hear me saying it again, right? It's all about focus. And so each of these metrics, and even what I'm describing right now about goal setting, is asking you to take smaller bites off of this big, gigantic philanthropic pie that you manage. I'm going to keep this pie metaphor as long as I can today, Katie. In your honor, we will talk pies as much as we can. So this is a way of really helping to create some bite-sized work that you can mantle with real confidence and strategy. So think about your goals. If you have all these already, fantastic. Make sure you bring them to the table when you start talking about your strategy and you get into campaign plans. And if not, now's a great time to do it. It's never too late to bake into your campaign the kinds of goals that you want to see. It'll help you measure it. Now, here is an important way of looking at goals and just straight up numbers. This is sort of data 101 for us in an annual fund world. In fact, in any patron related campaigns. There are 3 ways that we want to be able to look at gifts and relationships. Of course, there's revenue. You've got this. You have budgets. You are tracking against this all the time. Many of you are probably also looking at individual gifts. This is an important number because there's a direct relationship between revenue and numbers of gifts. And what trends do we see in that relationship? Is average gift size increasing or decreasing? Are fewer gifts bringing in more revenue or vice versa? It helps us understand the number of engagements that we have in these campaigns. But the last one is this, households. And in fact, we don't always see that all organizations are tracking gifts at the household level. We look at that gift level, but not at the person or people who are responsible for that gift. So right now, add this to your list, track households. Tracking households is the greatest way to assess the strength or not of your pipeline and to be able to keep ourselves focused on these human to human, people to people campaigns, which is fundamentally what this is. And the household likely is the best representation of the relationship that you're cultivating here. So several of the metrics that we have today are absolutely based in households, and we would encourage you to do that. If you can't and you have to use gifts, but make sure that when you You're looking at giving in multiple ways and bring households into the picture if it's not there now. Okay, now we really are getting into the 5 metrics. Katie, I will turn this over to you to get us started.
So unless this is your very first TRG webinar, you know that we're always talking about starting your campaigns with a segmentation strategy. And for many folks, that can be super granular. It's new, it's renewing, it's lapse, Libunt, Cybunt, upgrades. But while these are all very useful segments of communication strategy and should be tracked, in annual fund campaigns, the first and most important segmentation is separating new gifts from renewing gifts. In this separation, we can count lapsed and first-time gifts as new. So through this lens, we are essentially looking at retention. Who is with us for the long haul? We'll break out our analysis in 3 ways. So by units, as you're seeing right here, by revenue, and by households. The relationship between the 3 provides insight into areas of vulnerability and areas of opportunity. So getting a first gift is only the first step. Are you stewarding them effectively? Are you ensuring that they remain with us? So our next one, 2.
Well, and looking at this year over year, Katie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Looking at it year over year really helps you see where that opportunity is in your campaign. So for this organization, we can see that total gifts over the last 5 years have decreased. So that means that we have a tremendous number of lapsed donors that we can and should be targeting in really specific ways. We can also see that their renewing gifts are going down. So how are we leaning into that stewardship so that we're not reliant on so many new gifts every year? Now, we want new gifts. We want this balance of acquisition to retention. But I work with this organization, and I know that when they saw this, they said, wow, we really have to bring some people back into this because we've got folks in our pipeline just so recently lapsed that could help us bolster where we are now and move forward. So looking back at some historical data here, not just starting in this year, will really help you understand that pipeline and the trajectory of giving across those 3 metrics. All right, Katie, take us to number 2.
Great clarity, thank you. Okay, so we've all been there. It's the first day of our new fiscal year and you're looking at an empty revenue report and there's huge goals. I know it's overwhelming, and I think there's a real want and desire to just be done, to have all the money in again and to be in that happy place where you're celebrating. But what we want to really get you folks to really think about is to, rather than focus on the sum total goal, but to actually think about these incremental goals, to think about the pace and how they relate to the overall campaign. Thinking about actuals versus pace will allow you to get some perspective and, most importantly, actionable data. So when you aggregate historic data, you can see when your campaign you've achieved certain milestones. So historically, do you expect to get to 50% of goal by year end, or is your fiscal year end really the driver in your community? Knowing if you're ahead or behind will allow you to focus your energy and adjust if needed. If you're exceeding your historical pace and have capacity, great, pour fuel on that fire. Do more, focus on high performing segments and lean in. But if you're falling behind, then you need to reassess your messaging, your assets, your target prospects, your benefits, and your stewardship. Either way, you'll be armed with information to make smart moves and optimize your resources when your campaigns. When there is bandwidth, and I know this is a big if, think about segmenting this even further. This tool becomes even more actionable when you track pace of new versus renew, pace of major versus non-major.
Yeah. Katie, some of my clients are in, as I suspect many of you are, in different cycles than what you may have had historically. Subscriptions launched later. Single ticket sales campaigns are happening at different times of year. The start of your season is happening later or at a different time of year. All of those things can really impact, of course, donation. And when we've got people in the pipeline, when we have natural touch points for those that we're serving and engaging through other opportunities in our organization. So I just want to take a moment to say yes to historical data. And when your historical data is helpful and accurate for the campaigns that you can launch this year, lean into it every time. But I'm also going to say that I'm working with clients now to build some bespoke pacing tools that say, what does this year look like? Have a subscription campaign that allowed us to bring in lots of new acquisition gifts. So where do we need to make up for that? And then we started going through month by month and setting those goals. By month 1, we need to be at 10%. And here's how we're going to get to that 10%. By month 4, here's where we need to be, and then we set it there. But setting this baseline, either with historic data, if it makes sense for the campaign cycle that you're in, or just looking at month by month goals that brings in some outside context, right? What other campaigns do you have? When is marketing launching a big something? When do you have opportunities in your community for giving can help give you that baseline. But that baseline is so important to help you understand where you need to change things, just as Katie said. So just a note about how you can get to that baseline. Historic data, yes, 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 yes. And if it doesn't make sense right now, make it up. Set those goals with all of the good context and information that you have. Okay, any questions so far? Please drop them in chat. Katie's keeping an eye on that and can bring them forward if and when you have them. Our third metric is about donor crossover. So one of the things that we know in looking at data from thousands of organizations, in fact, is that one of the greatest predictors of donation is participation in other activities. It's really hard to find people off the street who have no relationship with your organization and turn them into donors, particularly in annual fund campaigns. It's not impossible, and you absolutely have some. But the majority of your donors are coming from within your database. These are people that you've had some connection with through ticket buying, membership, subscription, volunteerism, through actors or special events, free events. These are people that are already connected to you. And so we want to look at where your donors are crossing over with some of these other engagements that you have in your organization. How strong is your pipeline? If we see that really high crossover rates exist, what does that mean for where we need to start looking for additional donors? All of this is about giving you enough information to bring focus into your campaign and into your goal setting. So the first step in measuring engagement really is looking at a crossover percentage. Now, I've listed it here in 2 ways, and I think both of these ways are really important, and often we only look at one. But we would want to look at the percentage of donors who are also doing something else, or the percentage of a key pipeline feeder that's participating in philanthropic activities. So here I've used subscription or ticket buyers as examples. You should use whatever is good and right for your organization. But the first is the number of subscribers who donate, and the second is the number of donors who subscribe. Now, what we really want to see is goal setting and thoughtfulness on both sides of that equation. Yes, a subscription is a great pipeline into donation. And so seeing high crossover there is absolutely something that you want to strive for. But we also want to see that your donors are engaging in ways that keep them tethered and close to your art, to your people, to the relationships that really matter in your organization. I was a development director, and I had a group of donors who were very generous. They were some of our highest level donors, and they never came to a show. And I am absolutely certain that had they been more engaged in our work on stage, in our venue more often, and seeing the people that we brought together in the work that we did, their donations would have increased. So there would have been more relationship building opportunities there if they're regularly showing up. Okay, so look at it both ways. You'll know the right segments to look at. And this all comes down to this philosophy. It's the power of and. When people, any people, engage in more than one way with your organization, it does these things. It increases their investment every time. People saying yes to more never means they give less, they spend less. They always end up spending more. There's more belief that comes in this. There's more commitment that comes in doing more than one something. Their engagement increases. What I was just describing, if our major donors had been regular subscribers and coming to 7 shows a year, we would have had more frequency of engagement. We would have seen them at least 7 more times a year than we already did. So we see increased engagement. Again, with increased engagement comes increased belief and commitment and support in all the ways that you might define that. And then lastly, when people do more than one something, they come with higher renewability. For your marketing colleagues, those subscribers that are donating are more likely to resubscribe than subscribers that aren't. For you, your donors that are engaging in other activities in your organization, subscription, membership, ticket buying, education, they are more likely to continue to renew and upgrade their commitment. So this is what we see happening. So we want to really invest in the power of and looking at those initial crossover metrics will help you see where there's potential. Now, these numbers can vary greatly by organization. So I don't have a perfect best practice number that says 27% of subscribers should be donors. I don't know what it is for you. I don't know how many subscribers you have, how many of them are new, how many of them are already donating. So the way that I would approach this is to first look at where you are right now. This is your baseline today. Historic data is great, but you can also start this one today. How many of my subscribers donate? Great, it's 18%. We want to increase that by 5% this year. Use that as a baseline to do some goal setting. And now we know that part of your acquisition campaign is going to be about turning 5% of those subscribers into a donor in this year. It gives you tremendous focus there. Okay, other questions? Wait, I see questions just come in, hang on. Can you clarify the difference between a subscriber or ticket buyer who donates versus a donor who is a subscriber and ticket buyer? Isn't this ultimately the same profile of supporter? Yeah, the people are the same. It's the proportions that'll be different. So if you've got 1,000 subscribers and 20% of them give, then we know that's what those 200 donors do. But you might have 500 donors and only 200 are subscribers. So the percentages will be different. They will look at the same people, but it will change where your focus is in the campaign. One focus is going to be about getting subscribers to say yes to donation. The other focus is looking at current donors and saying, how do we engage them in other activities? I hope that makes sense. Emily, if you have further questions there, please share them and I'll go through it. Okay, our next metric is hard. I'm just going to say that it's hard to find. This is totally an advanced metric, but we want to look at upgrades and downgrades. This is also helpful in subscription. So I would just say that this doesn't have to only be a metric that we look at in annual funds and in philanthropic relationships. It can be helpful in transactional relationships as well. And it can be really hard to get in your system. And so I know that this is not likely a quick report that you can go into your ticketing database or your fundraising database and run, but it's worth the time to do sporadically. Do this once a year. Do this at some point where you have a little bit of time to go in and see how people are moving within your donor levels, within the cycles that you have. And there's good reason for movement. There's good reason for movement because they're responding to campaigns that you have. There's good reason for movement because we're in a pandemic and the way people are giving change. So there's no wrong answers to what upgrades and downgrades should be. But as we come out of the pandemic and hopefully into more traditional and predictable cycles, what we really want to see is that upgrades outpace or keep pace with downgrades. So we're interested in the proportionality of how many upgrades we have every year and how many downgrades we have every year. It gives us a sense of where our database is moving. Are they increasing loyalty? Are they responding more and more to what we're doing? Are they doing less and less? So remember, this isn't looking at what level first-time donors are coming into. This is looking at repeat behaviors, people who donated last year, and then they donate this year. what are they doing? Are they going up? Are they staying the same? Or are they decreasing their investment? So this is about second engagement in your philanthropic activities. Okay, that was a lot of words. And I said this is really hard and it's really, really worth it. And here's what this can look like. So this is from a client. And there's a lot on this slide. They're looking at it month over month. And we've got downgrade activity, same level activity, upgrade activity, and then new activity there at the top. Now, right now, they're measuring this in dollars. Dollars is a great way to look at it. And we can see up at the top where we have upgrade revenue, same level revenue. You just get a sense of how your database is behaving. They've got a lot of revenue that's just coming in the exact same way it did before. Right? So a majority of their gifts are $100 people who are still $100 people. They also have a big chunk there that's upgrade. So they were able to successfully move people into this upgrade behavior really, really effectively in this last year. And we've got that pink at the bottom that shows downgrades. So upgrade size is great. Yes, 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 we want to see that. And when we look at this differently and we look at it by households instead of by revenue, it starts to tell a slightly different story. This is why households become so important in these conversations. We see that the number of upgraded households was 458 and downgraded was 474. Now, it's not a huge difference, and I'm certainly not suggesting that it is, but it's looking at the patron behavior and how they're engaging in year 2 or year 3 that will let us double check for this. We don't want to see that downgrades start dramatically outpacing upgrades. If we start to see that happen, we know that we need to take action. We need different kinds of stewardship. We need to adjust our messaging. Maybe we need to look at number of touch points, channels that we're using to talk to people. Maybe we really need to look at our case for support if we start seeing that those downgrade numbers are outpacing same level and upgrade. Okay, Katie, take us home with number.
So I know as fundraisers, we oftentimes have sort of gut instincts of what is working, what our funders are really interested in, how they respond. I also know that we work in the performing arts, so we're super creative and we like to play around with different things. But ultimately, if you're not tracking your response rates, specifically at the segment level, you're oftentimes leaving money on the table and you may even be overspending on a campaign. Once back in the day when I was a fundraiser, I had this wonderful idea of doing this big shiny package and it would go to all of our LAPS files. Now, ultimately, this did not work. And the reason I know it didn't work is because I was tracking the responses. It wasn't effective across LAPS. It wasn't effective against renewals. And so I knew big shiny package does not work for our funders. But the only reason that I knew is because I was tracking who received what and who is responding back. So it's not hard to calculate this. What we're going to look at, the response rate, is for number of households that respond to your invitation divided by the number of households that are invited. It's most helpful when, as I mentioned, are calculated by segment, so we can see where the inflection points are. So this is another really great reason to really establish a trackable segment in your database. You'll see quickly where there's volume and where there's not, in my case, and allow you to really focus on your campaigns and change tactics. And we recommend looking at these results at the end of every campaign to inform your strategies, i.e. don't do shiny thing again, but also during your campaign so you can really sort of pivot and make action along the way. When you then sprinkle in some happy little A/B testing, it can get extra exciting. That's what I find exciting in life. So here we have an example of an aggregate response rate on acquisition segments. So having this bird's eye view allows us to prioritize our time, our investment, and our messages. These reports can also be great fuel for our friends in marketing. So taking these along to your weekly cross-department meeting is key. If folks aren't responding to us in our donation appeal, well, perhaps there's a better segment for them. Perhaps they should be targeted for a ticket subscription for classes. Here you'll see in this response report that that particular segment and the 1 year lapse donor segment really responded to the piece that we sent out versus something like a 3 year lapse donor. So knowing that kind of messaging will work again, so let's try it again next year. However, we should probably be tweaking that 3+ year lapse donor.
Katie, I think what you just said there is so important, that we're listing here all of these organizational segments, people that have had relationships with your institution, and you are here mantling your annual fund campaigns. And there are some segments that are not going to perform well for you there. And if you measure it this way, it sets you up really to have those awesome collaborative relationships with marketing, with education, with box office, with others in your organization, to say, what do we do here? This is a group that had historically performed well. They're not now. So let's talk about what the next best step for them is. We can think about that customer journey is not just in philanthropy. The customer journey is there within your whole organization. So with you looking at this for donation appeals, marketing looking at these kinds of response reports for single ticket sales or subscription sales, membership sales, you start to create a really lovely tapestry of information here that lets you all collaboratively make decisions about where you want to prioritize your invitations and appeals. Okay. Those, ladies and gentlemen, folks, everyone who's joined us today, were 5 metrics to support your thinking around measurement of your annual fund campaigns on the front end, as you're going through the campaign and after the campaign is over. We have more metrics to share in spaces like this on our website in TRG30, and we will continue to invite you to each of those. But you have Katie and I for about another 10 minutes today, and we would welcome any questions that you have about what we've discussed here, or questions that you have about your campaigns. And I also know you've got colleagues on the phone, on the phone. I don't know where I think we are, in Zoom, in our shared space, that would also give you feedback. So we'll give you just a couple of minutes. If you want to add your questions, please do. We'll address those. Otherwise, you can all have 10 minutes back in your calendar, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. So we'll give you just a minute here. Thanks again.
We'll also take pie recipes if there's any pie recipes out there, because clearly that's the driver for us today.
Yes, pie recipes welcome.
One thing I just want to know, if there was a moment in that last slide where I said, take these reports to your marketing friends, and you were like, oh, we don't have bi-weekly meetings, I would say that needs to be the top of your list. You need to make sure that you're meeting with your marketing friends and having those conversations, and that it is a two-way conversation of sharing that data, because it really has to be a co-created effort of communication.
Yes, 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 yes to that. Oh,
thank you, Emily.
Best pecan pie. That is my favorite pie personally, so particularly excited to check it out.
Skylar is asking us to explain actuals versus tape again.
Yeah, Katie, do you want to take it?
Sure thing. So I as Caitlin mentioned, I think that there's using historical aggregate data is really helpful. So being able to look at across, say, 5 years, what the pacing was for November, December, January, etc. As Caitlin mentioned, we're just in a really weird time right now. So while your historical data is going to be very helpful and will give you a starting point, I think you will have to still do some tweaks, knowing that maybe you don't have as many performances. So if you're doing an appeal that would normally be around a Christmas Carol and there is no Christmas Carol, then that's going to change things. So I would start with the data, see what the aggregate is that each month is saying that you'd normally be receiving, and creating a graph based on that, but then also knowing that there should be some fine tweaking. Caitlin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, really pace is goal, and it can be goal based on historical data or goal based on what is realistic within your year this year. And it's so you can do it as total dollar amounts if you're just doing it for this year, or as percentages against your goal. So if you have a goal of $250,000 in annual fund gifts, when do you expect to be at 50% of goal, and work backwards that way? And actuals is just cumulative actual revenue. Where are you so far month by month in your year? So it's really goal versus actual, but we want to look at it on a monthly basis instead of here's where I am today and here's where I need to be at the end of my fiscal year. So we just want to look at month to month actuals versus goal. It's a good question.
And realistically, the key is we're not dividing by 12, which is often what folks do. They take their goal, they divide it by 12, and that really is not actionable. That's not really going to represent where you need to put in extra effort and where you can spend more time strategizing.
Right. And when your campaigns are, it should really reflect when you have campaigns planned and how well you expect those campaigns to perform. Terrific. Well, folks, thanks again for joining us today. If you have questions that you'd like us, oh, wait, sorry. Opinions on importance of physical mailings. Yes, super important. My opinion is absolutely do it. And it's not just my opinion, it's the data. We see this in sales campaigns and in annual fund campaigns. There is always a spike when direct mail hits. Now, I also think it should be part of an omni-channel campaign. So absolutely include the phone. If you're not on the phone with your donors right now, get on the phone with your donors. Emails should and can support this. Social to some degree. If it's working for you, do it. You know, last year we brought together a group of about 60 development folks. Some of you may have been there. And what we learned is that everybody was doing social and nobody could measure its effectiveness. Nobody really knew if that was bringing in any donations. And so I would lean into channels, an omni-channel campaign where you can directly see results or test it, because social can take a lot of time for you, for your marketing colleagues, for whoever's creating all of these looks and feels for you. So if you don't know that it's working there, then I would maybe pull back on some of that. But if it is, do it. So yes, 100% to direct mail. Multiple touch points in a campaign will help. Just one letter is great. 2 letters is better. So if you can separate those out in a calendar year-end campaign or fiscal year-end, you will see, I suspect, increased response rates. Thanks for asking.
There was a sort of additional question to that around timing of how those omni-channel pieces should connect. And I would just throw in that, no, we don't want to bombard with someone with a letter, an email, a phone call, a knock on the door, whatever else you can imagine in one day. However, they should all be around the same time period. We want to ensure that people are seeing your message and it's resonating in different ways. Everybody responds differently. And so within a few days, you want to ensure that that letter drops as an email in the inbox. And if you're doing a follow-up phone call, that needs to go, a few days after they've had time to percolate. All of these things should really continue to strengthen that message.
Yeah, absolutely. Phone calls are super effective and really time consuming and can be expensive. So I would let direct mail do as much of the heavy lifting as it can before you go into phone, and then have a really good consolidated call room investment, however you're doing this, that starts to look at kind of cleanup, the part of the cleanup campaign. We don't need to necessarily get on the phone with a very likely renewing donor. So that's where I would maybe give yourself the most space. But letter, and then just as Katie said, a few days later, email, a week and a half later, maybe one more letter or a card. You can spread it out over weeks, but think about maybe one touch point a week or so is a good way to start thinking about it.
And another reason to measure, if you know that the Smiths only respond to a phone call, just call them. If you know that they are more responsive to a letter, that's great too. Measure, measure, measure.
Terrific. Okay, well, you will get follow-up from us this afternoon. So that also means you will have our email addresses if you don't already. We welcome additional questions that way, or we can jump on the phone with you and your organization. We wish you all the best of luck in your calendar year-end campaigns and everything that's there to follow. Katie, happy holidays to you and yours as we come into this holiday season, and to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, folks. Happy holidays.